everyone. Today I'm going to be reviewing the new leaks for Duel Links, especially the new mini box energy of Gigarays. I'll be reviewing all the cards that are leaked and some of the skills. So let's go off with the leaked cards that aren't part of the box. First off, Seal of Orichalcos. It just sucks. I'm not going to say much about it. There's not really much to say, honestly. You can't special summon any monsters from the extra deck, and it destroys all special summon monsters you control when you activate it. So those are both pretty bad. But I mean, maybe there's a deck that this could go in. It's only, but like 500 attack is not a big attack boost anyway. So let's just move on. Summoner's Art. It's a really good searcher, especially for one of the cards that will be in the box. If we get more than one of this, I feel like this is going to be banned if it's a free card. Well, not banned, maybe like limited or semi-limited. Zoma the Spirit. I'm guessing this could be a one-off in the Bakura level ups. It's just an okay burn card. Since burn is halved though, it's way worse though, so it's probably not that good. Now let's actually get into the mini box. Let's start off with the Klee monsters that are introduced in the archetype in this box. First off is Apocalypse Sky Base. Requires 3 tributes to summon, and it's unaffected by spell and trap effects and activated effects of any monsters whose original levels are lower. So anything level 9 or lower cannot affect this monster. Like, that's really hard to out. 2900 is a pretty decent stat line. However, there is Diamond Crab King in Duel Links. So basically any deck that can make 2 level 4s can pretty easily out Skybase. And they don't even have to crash to out it. They just trade and Diamond Crab King stays on the field. So I don't know if like Skybase Turbo is the way Klees will actually go in this game. I'm thinking because of certain other cards that I'm going to review later, they might just play this as a one-off, as like an option to close out a game if your opponent runs out of removal, like level 4 removal. But yeah, let's go up next to the actual Klee cards that are probably going to be more played. First up, Clifford Scout. I'm going to go with this one first because it's a Rhoda for the entire Klee archetype, including the spell traps. So that means you can search Sack Cleefice, which is also in here, and that's another searcher. But like, this is going to be insane. It's level 5, it's a normal monster, so that means it can be searched with Summoner's Art, which we're potentially getting 3 copies of, which would mean 6 copies of Scout. Which in a 20 card deck is like an 80% chance to find at least 1 Scout. Next up, Clifford Carrier. All the Klees share effects, the same effect, where if they're normal summoned or special summoned, they become level 4s and their original attacks are 1800. And you can also normal summon it without tribute. This one's unique effect is you can target a monster on the field and return to hand if this card is tributed. So you could potentially like use like a Ballista Squad and get a Destruction and a Bounce, which would be pretty good. And it also obviously triggers off of tribute summons, which the Klees love. Let's go to Helix next, because it's basically the same thing as Carrier, except it destroys the spell and trap when it's tributed. Which is slightly less good, because there are some decks that don't have spells and traps that you would care about destroying. But it's still pretty good. This is probably a 2 off. I'm feeling Carrier is probably a 3 off. Then let's go into the other Klees. Stealth is next. When it's tribute summoned, you can target a card in the field and return to hand. So if you combine that with the like Carrier, you can target a monster, bounce, and then target something else and bounce that. Also, your opponent cannot activate cards or effects in response to this card's effects activation. So Duel Links doesn't have chain blocking, so this kind of might suck a little more. If it's not programmed to like automatically be the last thing in the chain when you tribute summon a Carrier or a Helix, then it sucks. But if it does do that, then it's fine. It's still a good card. Like, bouncing any card is good. but not being able to make it unrespondable sometimes if Duel Links is programmed a certain way really does suck. And that's just one of the many gripes about Duel Links that I have, but that's kind of off topic for this video. Next up, Clifford Disc. When this is tribute summoned, by tributing a Clee monster, you can special summon 2 Clee monsters from your deck, destroying them during the end phase. So this is good because it can help with OTKs. Like, you're basically getting 2 1800 bodies for free. Like, they'll get destroyed, but they'll go to the extra deck because they're pendulums anyway, so it doesn't, that part doesn't really matter. But you could, I mean, this could also potentially be a way to turbo out Skybase, because you could, there is a card in the archetype that gives an extra normal summon, which I'll get to later. But you could tribute summon Clifford Disc, and then summon 3, and then tribute summon Skybase. But I feel like this is probably better for just pushing damage, because you don't lose any advantage really for putting the Clees getting destroyed in the end phase, because you can just pen summon them back. Well, pen summon one of them back because of Duel Links pendulum rules. But it's still pretty good. Next, Sacrifice. I already mentioned it, but it just adds a Clee monster from your deck to your hand when it's sent from the field to the grave. And it's a Quip. It also makes your Clees be able to be count as 2 tributes for a tribute summon. So you could attach it to like a Helix or a Carrier, and they can completely fill the conditions for Stealth or Disc. So like that effect is pretty good. And it basically helps you float because it floats on when it leaves the field after being tributed basically. You'll probably run like 2 or 3. I think more than likely 2, because it is searchable off of Scout. And you don't want too many, because you'll probably get like a hand where you get 3 Sacrifice and then 3 Sacrifice and then 1 other spell trap, so you can't actually use the sacrifices. So I think 2 is probably the correct amount in Duel Links. Next up, Clifford Shell. If this is normal summon by tributing a Clee monster, it can make a second attack during each battle phase, and it deals piercing. So this is also another OTK enabler. Not really much to say. Like, the thing is with the higher level ones that don't have effects when tributed, is that they're all searchable off of Scouts, so you don't really need to run that many of them. So I think 1 shell, pretty good, able to enable OTKs, and that's about it. Cephalopod, its unique effect is when it's summoned by tributing a Clee monster, you can activate this effect. If your opponent has more monsters in their graveyard than you do, you gain life points equal to the difference times 300, and if you do, inflict the same amount of damage to your opponent. But since this is Duel Links, that damage is halved, so it's going to be like 1500. I mean, 150. It's just really shitty burn, so I don't think you would even play this. I mean, at least the effect will always be decent, because your opponent's always going to have more monsters in their graveyard than you do, because it's a pendulum deck and all your monsters go to the extra deck. But yeah, that's all I have to say about Clees. I think you could probably build it to be like a back row deck with like Ballista Squads and Econs and all that. Skybase Turbo is probably not the way to do it, just because Skybase is honestly pretty easy to out. It's not really a Towers. It's nothing really compared to Towers, but it's still a decently strong monster. You'd probably just play one of them and hope you don't draw into it, and search off a Scout rather. But yeah, that's it for Clees. Next up is all the Jinzo support. So first up, Psychic Mega Cipher. If your opponent controls more spell traps than you do, you can special summon this card from your hand. I mean, that's pretty good, but the thing is, it's only good going second, which you can't choose to do in Duel Links, which is super annoying. So it potentially could brick your hand, honestly, if you ever have to go first. So maybe like 1 or 2 of them. Its second effect is kind of slow. When it declares an attack on an effect monster while you control Jinzo, you tribute itself and then places that monster in their opponent's monster zone as this continuous trap. Like, it is removal, like guaranteed removal, but like Catastor exists in the game and sees 0 play. So, and this has way harder conditions to fulfill than Catastor. Controlling a Jinzo is pretty annoying. So I don't think you'll use it for that second effect, but being a free special summon of a level 6 is pretty good. And that free special summon can lead into this next card, Jinzo Layered. It's a generic rank 6. You can detach one material from this card and target one face-up monster your opponent controls, take control of until the end phase, but it cannot activate its effects or declare an attack. If a trap is on the field, you contribute one monster, and if you do, destroy one face-up card on the field. So the synergy with the second effect is all pretty obvious with Psychic Mega Cyber. It's just that doesn't really work well in Duel Links because there's no main phase 2. Like you tribute Mega Cyber, put your opponent's monster into the spell and trap zone as a continuous trap, but there's no main phase 2 to then use Jinzo Layered into. So that part kind of sucks. And like the first effect is obviously to fuel the second effect, but we don't have link monsters in Duel Links. So the first effect is kind of hard to use, honestly. You might be able to use it as like you can use your opponent's monster as tribute fodder for like a Jinzo. But other than that, it's pretty bad. Let's see, next up. Law of the Cosmos. Your opponent can set one trap directly from their hand or deck to their spell trap zones, and if they do, special summon one Jinzo from your deck, which is never going to go off if your opponent will actually read the card. But otherwise, it's basically just Rhoda. Add any Jinzo or a monster that specifically lists Jinzo. So like, a Rhoda for the archetype is always good. Like that first effect never going off is fine, because it's just a Rhoda for the archetype. You'll probably run 3. And there's another Rhoda for the archetype in Psychic Bounder. When it's normal or special summon, you add a Jinzo or a spell trap that specifically lists Jinzo from your deck to your hand. And its other effect is just shitty Sakuretsu armor. Before damage calc, when another monster you control is attacked by an opponent's monster, destroy both the attacking monster and this card. Like that effect's never gonna go off, because like unlike Sakuretsu armor, which is a trap that's set, your opponent can just read this card. Which, to be fair, a lot of people don't read in Duel Links, so maybe it will go off commonly. But like good players won't fall for this anyway. There's also an unrelated card, because this is actually a retrain of Reflect Bounder, and Reflect Bounder is just Magic Cylinder, but a monster. But yeah, this isn't really related to Jinzo, but Espa Roba used it in the anime, so that's why they made Psychic Bounder a retrain and connected to Jinzo. Next Jinzo card. It's Everlasting Alloy. It's basically Forbidden Dress. Either your machine monsters can't be destroyed by card effects, or if a card or effect targets a machine monster you control, negate the effect. But these only apply if you control Jinzo. And like even with all this support, Jinzo is still fairly hard to get off. Well, except Law of the Cosmos can search Jinzo Ejector, which can summon Jinzo. So actually, you know, Jinzo actually isn't so hard to get out now. Now I think about it. But the problem is going to be that like Jinzo still dies to like Book of Moon, which is one of the most commonly played deck cards, and Forbidden Chalice, which is not as commonly played, but still commonly played. So trap decks still do, like back row decks still do have a way out of dealing with Jinzo, and it's not as good nowadays. But like you can Law of the Cosmos, search Jinzo Ejector, summon Jinzo Ejector, summon Jinzo. Like that does deal with a lot of the trap decks. Something like Phantom Knights might have a hard time dealing with that. Next up, Cosmo Channeling. Send a monster you control that is owned by your opponent to a graveyard, which obviously you use Jinzo Layered for that. Then you special summon a machine monster from your hand or graveyard. So you basically just provide Rennie Machine Monster. That's like not too bad. And then the second effect, when your opponent draws for their normal draw in your draw phase, while you control Jinzo, declare a card type, monster, spell, or trap. Your opponent reveals the card, and if it's declared card type, send this card to the graveyard, and if you do, draw one card. So that second effect kind of sucks. Honestly, that first effect is way too hard to get off, because it pretty much only triggers off Jinzo Laird. Like, Econ technically also does it, which would be good synergy in the Jinzo deck, because it's a quick play spell, which is with disruption without being a trap. But like still, this first effect is pretty annoying to pull off. And the second effect is just silly. Like, it's a slow upstart goblin if you get it right. Which probably won't happen. Next up, Psychic Wave. If you control a machine monster, send a Jinzo from your hand or deck to the grave, inflict 600 damage to your opponent. Just shitty burn. That's not a good effect, but the Foolish Burial part is cost, so you can send Jinzo for cost and then revive it. So maybe you'll play one of. And then the second effect is, target a machine monster in your graveyard, send a Jinzo monster from your deck to the grave, and if you do, add the targeted monster to your hand. So this is another Foolish Burial, so it's basically a double Foolish Burial, except the second part is kind of slow. You can only do once per turn. But still, like, you could add back a Jinzo, which I guess is fine. But otherwise, I don't see this really seeing play. Like, the problem is Jinzo doesn't really have a graveyard effect. If you send it with, like, this Foolish Burial-like effect, you're basically having to hope you can revive it, too. So you might play, like, Oasis of Dragon Souls and Monster Reborn, but you don't want too many of those, because it's basically just a 2-card combo that's unsearchable for one of the pieces. Like, this piece is searchable with Psychic Bounder, but the Revival Trap or Spell is not searchable. Let's just move on to Cyber Energy Shocker. If you control Jinzo, target a card in the field, destroy it. If it was a trap, you can apply one of these effects. Negate the effects of one face-up card on the field until the end of the turn, and each Jinzo you control gains 800 attack. So, like, this is pretty good. If you summon a Jinzo out, you just get a free quick play pop. So overall on these Jinzo cards are, like, my thoughts are Law of the Cosmos, really good. But these SRs kind of suck, honestly. I feel like Law of the Cosmos is just the best card here. And now, like, looking at these cards, it makes sense why they finally put Jinzo into Card Trader. You probably wouldn't play 3 Jinzo though. But Law of the Cosmos being able to search Jinzo Jector and then that being able to summon Jinzo, that might be splashable, honestly. If your deck doesn't need a normal summon, you can just get a free Jinzo to deal with all your opponent's spells, traps. Well, not spells, just traps. Yeah, the biggest weakness with Jinzo is definitely going to be Book of Moon and every other quick play spell that it's seen play, because Jinzo can't deal with those. But overall, this Jinzo support is good. I just don't think it'll actually be like meta as its own deck. Let's see, next up, it's all the 2 Amazonas cards that they put in. So Amazonas Village, first off, it's a really strong card. All Amazonas monsters gain 200 attack, which is minuscule. But the second effect, once per turn, when an Amazonas monster is destroyed by a battle or card effect and sent to a grave, you can special summon 1 Amazonas monster from your deck with a level less than or equal to the Amazonas monster. So that part is insane, because you can, like, there are a couple of cute plays. If you have Onslaught up, that's basically 2 banishes. If you have Swordswoman up, you can Swordswoman Crash and special summon our Swordswoman. That's kind of cute. And Village is searchable off of Princess. I mean, you still want to search Onslaught more, but, like, having another search target for Princess besides, like, the other shitty search targets you can add does help. I don't think Amazonas will be that much better though. Like, just this one card is not enough, because it still, like, lives or dies by Onslaught. Next up, Amazonas Pet Liger. uses Amazon's Tiger and any Amazon's monster. Once per battle, if this card attacks during battle calculation, you can make this card gain 500 attack during that damage calculation only. If your Amazon's monster attacked an opponent's monster after damage calculation, you can target one face-up monster your opponent controls and lose 800 attack. So it's just like really shitty attack buffs and debuffs. I forgot to read the last effect though. Monsters your opponent controls cannot attack Amazon's monsters you control except this one. So this was potentially an attack lock if you do use Tiger plus this on the field. But that's still not that good. And it's a fusion when Amazons don't have a fusion spell in the game. So like you could probably make a meme with like Master of Fusions to get polymerization outside of your deck. But this kind of sucks. You'd rather not run it, and you'd rather not summon it, because its effects are just kind of minuscule. That's up for the Amazon support. I think the saddest part about this Amazon support is Liger, I think, deconfirms Tyler Sisters. But then again, they did get new support in the OCG, so maybe that dream isn't dead. Let's see, next up is all the random assorted cards. Let's start off with the cover card, Gandora Gigarays. So, it has to be special summoned from your hand by sending 2 other monsters from your hand or field to the grave. So, already you're going -2 to summon it. And it gains 300 attack for each banished card, which is fine, like Grand Maju. Once per turn, you can pay half your life points, apply this effect, depending on the number of Gandora monsters with different names in your graveyard. 1. Destroy all cards on the field. 2. Destroy all other cards on the field. 3 or more, banish, 2 is banish all cards, then 3 or more is banish all cards on the field and in the graveyards. So I don't think that 3 effect is going to go off very often, but you could feasibly do the 2 effect with one of the skills that were data mined. I'll get into that later, but like this entirely depends on how like good the skill is. But other than that, there's not much to say about it, because if you're trying to do this without using the skill, it's pretty much impossible and not worth talking about. Next up, Cursed Necrophere. Cannot be normal summoned or set, must be special summoned by a card effect. You can target 3 of your banished fiend monsters, special summon this card from your hand, and if you do, shuffle those banished monsters into a deck. During the end phase, if this card is in the graveyard because it was destroyed in your monster zone by an opponent's card effect, card effect or battle, and since they're this turn, special summon this card from your graveyard. Then you can destroy a card your opponent controls up to a number of face-up spell traps you control with different names. So that second effect is obviously for Destiny Board synergy, but Duel Links doesn't have Destiny Board because there's no way to make Destiny Board work with only 3 zones. It's not like on a shitty skill that you can't really run with it, because there's another skill they just leaked that helps get out Cursed Necrophere and Dark Necrophere. But other than that, it's not very good. And the second effect is just way too slow, because your opponent can see it coming, and they'll probably just like banish with Malevolent Sin and just attack directly instead of trying to destroy it. So even with the skill, I don't think this will be that good. Next up, Deal Bound Colonel. When this card declares an attack, it gains 600 attack. Quick effect, you can target one face-up monster your opponent controls. It loses the attack equal to the card's current attack until the end of this turn. Then banish this card until the standby phase of the next turn. So the biggest problem with this, it's level 5. It has pretty shitty stats for a level 5, but it does go up to 24, which is acceptable. But like a random tribute summon monster that's like a shitty wind-up rabbit is not good. It's not going to see play at all. Next up is the 2 Gravekeeper cards, which I accidentally glossed over. Commanded just means 9 copies of Necro Valley, which is potentially good. And then Imperial Tombs is kind of hard to pull off because you need both the Gravekeeper's monster and the Necro Valley. And Necro Valley's Throne is only once per turn, so you can't. If you use it to search commandment to get the Necro Valley that you don't have, then you potentially might not have a monster for this. So it's kind of clunky, but I think you might still play like 1 or 2 of them. Probably just 1. It is searchable off the fusion. Like, is Gravekeeper's commandment enough to push Gravekeepers to meta relevance is really the question here. Because this is the bigger card of the 2 that they just added. And I honestly don't think so. Because there are like top meta decks like Harpies that just do not care at all about Necro Valley. And that's the biggest thing holding Gravekeepers back. That they're kind of just a one-trick thing. Like, yeah, Necro Valley is strong against a lot of decks. But if there are top meta decks that don't care about it, then Gravekeepers do suffer. Let's go back to all the random assortment of cards that they added. Spirit Reaper. It's been power crap to hell. Cannot be destroyed by battle is not good enough. Especially since if anything that targets Spirit Reaper can destroy it. So you can use like an equip spell to destroy Spirit Reaper. And its second effect will basically never come up. It's a win more effect because your opponent has to have a clear field for Spirit Reaper to deal damage because you are buffing it with like equip spells because it can't be if you target it even if you target it with an equip spell, it'll still destroy itself. So yeah, Spirit Reaper's kind of been power crept to hell. Pot of Riches. Shuffle 3 Pendulum monsters into your deck from your graveyard or face-up extra deck, then draw 2 cards. You can only activate one of this card per turn, and you cannot special summon the turn you activate this card, except by Pendulum Summon. So the biggest problem with this card is that it kind of doesn't really understand what Pendulums want. Because Pendulums want to be in the extra deck. Like, you don't want your Pendulums to get shuffled back into a deck where you can't access them. And the second effect kind of sucks too, because like some of the best uses for Pendulums is as material for another extra deck summon. So yeah, Pot of Riches kind of sucks. There might be a pure Pendulum deck that can maybe make it work. Something like Dino Mists maybe, but even then, Dino Mists don't really care too much about putting Pendulum monsters back into their deck. Next up, Echo Oscillation. Target a card in your Pendulum Zone, destroy it, then draw 1 card. So this is actually potentially good. The biggest problem with it is that's a trap, which means it's a little slow. But like maybe in like a control Pendulum deck, this can be very insane. Maybe like Cleaforts that were just introduced, you could potentially gain a bunch of card advantage by popping your own scales. But otherwise, it's kind of slow because it's a trap. And just drawing 1 is probably not enough to make it see play. Let's see, next up is the Whites. White Princess is a foolish burial for White Prince. And it's also a shitty hand trap that reduces attack and defense equal to the level or rank of monsters. Let's go up into White Prince, which is mentioned in White Princess. If this card is sent to a grave, you can Foolish Burial Skull Servant and Lady in White. And then as an ignition effect, you can banish 2 Skull Servants from your graveyard and discard. Special summon King of the Skull Servants from your deck. So this is a good way of getting Skull Servant, King of the Skull Servants onto the field and Skull Servants into your grave to boost up that King of the Skull Servants. And you can just do it off of 1 normal summon of White Princess. So that's pretty good. Next up, White Mare. This card's name becomes Skull Servant while on the grave. Target one of your banished Skull Servants or White Mares, return to a graveyard when you discard this card. Like, it has an ignition effect, you can discard it. And then target one of your banished Lady in Whites or King of the Skull Servants, special summon them. So this is pretty strong, actually. You can, like, getting a way to actually summon Skull Servant, like Lady in Whites, is pretty useful because Lady in White's protection effect is insane. And a good way to like recycle King of the Skull Servants from when they're banished is also pretty good. But that's pretty much it for Whites. I don't know, White Princess is insane. The problem being it uses up your normal summon, and White Prince, like banishing the cards that help boost up the King of the Skull Servants kind of sucks. but like finally getting the white support into Duel Links is pretty nice, even though it probably isn't going to be meta relevant. Next up, Legendary Fisherman 3, just randomly in this. Cannot be normal summoned or set, must be special summoned by tributing one Legendary Fisherman. When this is special summoned, you can banish all monsters your opponent controls. Also, this card cannot attack. Cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects, also unaffected by spell or trap effects. Once returned, you can return as many of your opponent's banished cards as possible to the grave. If you do the first battle or effect damage your opponent takes, this turn becomes doubled. So, the biggest problem with this card is that it's not searchable, and neither is a Legendary Fisherman. And I know Legendary Fisherman 2 is already in the game, and it counts as Legendary Fisherman on the field, but that still isn't searchable. So you basically, to get this card out, it's a 3-card combo, because you need Legendary Ocean or like Tribute Fodder, then the Legendary Fisherman 2, and then this card. So even though its protection is insane and probably stronger than a lot of cards, it's pretty hard to get out. And even if you do get it out, it's honestly not that hard to deal with, because it can still be targeted. Like, unless you have C Stealth Attack up to banish it, to protect it, it's not that big of a deal, honestly. Next up, for another random card, Gravekeeper's Servant. I mean, it's technically a Gravekeeper's card, but there's no synergy with Gravekeepers, really. Like, your opponent must send a card from the top of your deck to a grave to declare an attack. That's more beneficial to your opponent than detrimental. Like, it's just garbage nowadays. Especially since so many cards have, like, grave effects. Next card, Fenrir. It's not good. It special summons itself by banishing 2 water monsters, and it's so old itself is removed from play. And when it destroys a monster as a result of battle, your opponent skips their next draw phase. So it's like a kind of harder to pull off Yada Lock, because its stats are pretty low, and it has to destroy a monster compared to Yada, which just needs to deal effect damage, like battle damage. I mean, I just like it because it's cool, and it's a Tag Force, like, it's one of the Tag Force starter deck cards, so it's pretty nostalgic to me. But other than that, it's not going to see play. Electric Virus. Discard this card to a grave, then target one machine or dragon monster your opponent controls. Take control of that target until the end phase. So, like, it's a side deck card, but Duel Links doesn't have native side decks, so only see, like, tournament play. So yeah, that's not very good. Next up, Insect Barrier. Insect monsters your opponent controls cannot declare an attack. Not very good. Combos with DNA Surgery, but both these cards are unsearchable. I also forgot to mention Laser Clip. During your main phase, you can normal summon 1 Clee monster in addition to your normal summon set, which I did mention for something else, which is for the Disc. This is the card that you can combo it with. I think it's fine. Honestly, you're not going to be doing that much normal summoning with Clees, because Scout completes its own scales, so you're going to be doing more pendulum summoning. But like, it's still fine, maybe as a one-off. Its second effect probably won't come up, the normal summons or Clees can't be negated, because there's not really many ways to negate normal summons in Duel Links. So it's pretty much just a searchable double summon. And then the other Cleave card I forgot to mention, Clipper Launch. Until the end of this turn, all normal summon set Cleave monsters on the field gain 300 attack, or are unaffected by other spell trap effects. Also, their effects are negated, which is not a detriment, because they don't have effects on field, basically. So, negating a card's effects when it's treated as a level 4 means that these Cleaves just basically turn to their original stats, which is insane, because that means you get out a 2800 or a 2400 for free. I think that's probably just like a one-off though, because it's searchable. I mean, it's also a Forbidden Lance for the entire field, which is nice. But that's it for the box. Overall, honestly, I think Cleaves actually do have potential, especially with the new Pendulum Zone buff. So, like, you could actually run more back row in the deck instead of having to jam 12 pendulum monsters into a deck just to make the skill requirement. But I do think Cleese have potential, but the other cards are kind of meh, except for Gravekeeper's Commandment, which I would keep an eye on, because even though right now Gravekeepers would not be very good because of Harpies and other decks that don't care about the grave, they do have potential to be a good anti-meta deck in the future. Next up, let's skip all the Bakura stuff. Let's go look at the skills. White Magician's Shining Shield can be used if you control a spellcaster monster. Roll a dice 2 times. Monster your opponent controls with a level equal to or greater than the sum of the result cannot attack your opponent's next turn. Can only be used once per turn. So, like for any spellcaster deck, this is potentially a way to survive one more turn. The biggest problem is that it rolls dice, and you could like completely whiff and roll 2 1s or something, or even something like, even like anything like 4 or lower might not be very good. Also only affects levels, so Exceeds just completely get around this, so this is not a very good skill. Next up, White Magician's Defensive Spell. Can be used if you control a spellcaster monster. Roll a dice 2 times. Apply the appropriate effect based on the result. A 2, decrease the defense of all monsters your opponent controls by 1,000. 3 to 7, decrease the defense of all monsters your opponent controls by 700. 8 to 11, decrease defense of all monsters your opponent controls by 500. 12, decrease the defense of all monsters your opponent controls by 100. Like, it's just a shitty defense debuff. Like, there's not many decks that just spam defense position monsters, so honestly, it's not even that good. Like, even if you do roll a 2, which is very unlikely, reducing 1,000 defense isn't that good. Next, Occult Maniac. If you have 5 or more Fiend-type monsters or zombie monsters with different names in your deck, you have an improved chance of having a Fiend-type monster or zombie-type monster in your opening hand. You cannot special summon or activate monster effects until the end of the main phase of your first turn. So the problem is this restriction that they added to a lot of other consistency skills. Like, this just completely kills the skill. Not being able to activate effects until the end of the main phase really does suck. And I don't think there's any Fiend or zombie decks that actually have like quick effects. Like Trimids can at least get around balance, but I don't think there's any decks that could actually make use of this. Next, Monster Encounter. Send 1 Fiend-type monster or zombie-type monster, well, non-effect monster from your hand or deck to the graveyard. Roll a die 2 times and play 1 Fiend-type or zombie-type non-effect monster with level or rank below from your graveyard based on the results. If you get 2, you get a level or rank of 8 or lower. If you get 3 to 11, which is most likely, you're going to get 4 or lower. And if you get 12, you get a 2 or lower. The skill can only be used if you begin to duel with a deck that includes at least 1 monster, contains no monsters other than Fiend-type or zombie-type monsters. Excluding Extra Deck, though. Biggest problem with this is always dice rolls. Like, dice rolls are so unreliable. And honestly, the payoff is just not worth it. Like, it's just a Monster Reborn, which is not that good. Like, it's fine on the skill, but the problem is it's also non-effect, which means anything you can revive off it isn't even going to be that good. Next up, building a Diorama. Can be used during the duel when you have a ritual monster whose original level is 8 or higher, add 1 field spell from your deck to your hand, then return 1 card from your hand to the bottom of your deck. And you can only use this skill if you begin to duel with a deck that contains at least 4 ritual monsters and 4 ritual spells. I can't think of a couple decks that can fill that requirement. The problem is that I can't think of any field spells that would actually synergize with this. Like, the best use would probably just be to search Necro Valley, I guess. But other than that, I don't know any like Duel Links decks that could actually use this. Actually, maybe Vendreads can use this, because Vendreads can summon Executor and then just add the Knights. I mean, that's probably not that good. You'd probably still run Master of Rites because that's better. But like, it's an option for Vendreads. Next up, Determination to fight. Apply either of the following effects, then place one Gandora, the Dragon of Destruction, or one Gandora X to your graveyard from outside of your deck. So one first effect is return one card from your hand to your deck. Add one Gandora monster from your deck to your hand, then you can normal summon one Gandora monster in addition to your regular normal summon. And then send one gadget monster from your field to the grave. Play Silent Magician level 4 or Silent Magician level 3 from outside your deck. The skill can only be used if you begin to duel with a deck that contains at least 10 gadgets, Silent Magician or Silent Swordsman monsters. So the problem, like this skill has a really strict restriction. Like gadgets are probably the best for this, but you can only have up to 9 gadgets really. Like you don't want to run too many of the gadgets. Actually, no, you could fulfill it just completely with gadgets. But you probably won't play Silent Swordsman or Silent Magician in this kind of deck. Like this is where the synergy comes in with Gigarays. Like this is to help fuel the graveyard for its effect, but it's kind of slow for that. You can at least guarantee the first effect, but the problem is you're gonna have you're gonna go pretty minus to summon Gigarays Gandora. So I don't think that it's just gonna be a slight gimmick deck and nothing more. Next up, Spirit Grasp. This is gonna help summon Dark Necrofear. You send one level 8 Dark monster from your hand to the graveyard, then draw one card. And then can be used before your normal draw if you have at least 3 monsters in your grave. Instead of conducting your normal draw, you add one level 5 or higher monster from your hand to your graveyard. To your hand from your graveyard. So that's going to be probably the Cursed Necrofear. Then you select up to 3 Fiend monsters in your graveyard and banish them. So that's one way to like help turbo out Cursed Necrofear. But you need to have a Dark Necrofear in your deck and only Fiend type or Zombie type monsters. And that's not very good, honestly. Like Cursed Necrofear is not good enough payoff to like have all these restrictions. But I guess drawing one card is kind of strong. Like maybe you could use this like since it counts zombies, you can maybe use this in like Shiranui potentially. And you have like Dark Necrofear as a brick that just draws a card. Well, not a brick, it's just like an upstart. Like that could potentially be useful. I don't know though. Supernatural Tactics. Send one monster on your field that originally belonged to your opponent, or a monster on your field with Jinzo in its text to the grave. Then play one Fiend Mega Cyber from outside your deck. Following this, if your opponent does not control any trap cards, place one face-up Cyber Raider to your opponent's spell trap zone from outside the deck as a continuous trap card. You can special summon only machine type monsters during the turn you activate this skill. So this helps turbo out Jinzo, like, but that's only if you can send a monster your opponent send the opponent's monster to the graveyard. Actually no, you can use a monster on the field with Jinzo in its text. So you could normal summon Psychic Bounder and use the effect. It's not that bad actually. Like normal summon Psychic Bounder, tribute it for this effect, summon Fiend Mega Cyber, and then place a continuous trap in your, like Ojama is your opponent's spell trap zone, which is potentially useful. It's not too bad. Can be used if you control a face-up monster at the beginning of your battle phase. Roll a 10-sided dice 2 times and apply the appropriate effect based on results. 2 zeros. Your monster gains 1,000 attack and defense at the end of the turn, and battle damage they inflict to your opponent is doubled. So this is obviously the best effect. 1 to 9. Your monsters gain 5 attack and defense at the end of this turn. 10 and 49. Wait, how am I supposed to read this? You roll a 10-sided dice. So you roll a d10. If you get zeros on both, you gain 1,000. Okay. 0 to 1, 0, 1, and 0, 9. Your monster gains 500. 10 to 49 gains 200. How are you supposed to get to 49 with a d10? 50 to 98? Oh wait, I understand it now. So you're supposed to, you just have the two of them as digits, basically. So the first one, if you get first one 0, second one 0, 1,000. First one 0, second one 1 to 9. It's 500. First one 10 to 4, second one 0 to 9. It's 200. Second one 5 to 9. First one 5 to 9, second one 0 to 8. Your monster gains 100. If you get 2 9s, your monsters become 0. So this is just obviously shitty because it's a dice skill. But yeah, that's all the skills and all the cards that were leaked. That's it for the video. If you want to prove me wrong, comment below if you have a different idea. Otherwise, if you like this video, like and subscribe. Do all the YouTube stuff. Otherwise, I'll see you guys next time whenever I make a video or live stream. But until then, see you guys.